Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Tip of the Iceberg podcast, your home for Pittsburgh Penguins news and analysis. You can find us on YouTube at Tip of the Iceberg or anywhere you get your podcast from. It is Monday, which means that we are going to dive into our Pittsburgh Penguins Power Rankings, Week 3 edition of these Power Rankings. But before we get into this, because there's one player that has dropped from the rankings that I'm sure everybody's going to have an opinion on. I got my top 5 locked and loaded and ready to go. And I also have one honorable mention that I want to kind of toss out there as a guy that could easily find his way into the top 5 in the coming weeks. But before we get into that, it is October, which means it's Breast Cancer Awareness Month. And we at Tip of the Iceberg are proud to partner with the Rangers Ed podcast and Little Ed's Workshop to raise money for Breast Cancer Awareness Month. Head on over to the link in our description below to check out the men's and women's t-shirts that we have up for sale, as well as one selection of a hooded sweatshirt that you can get. Again, 100% of the profits donated directly to breast cancer research and breast cancer awareness. We're doing this the remainder of October, so if you're interested, again, link in the description below. Check out some of these shirts. They're well worth it. Great athletic material. I don't have it on today. I had to get it washed because I've been wearing it so much since it came in the mail a couple of weeks back. So go ahead and check that out. But let's get started on these power rankings. And let's begin with the one player that is dropped from the rankings. A player that, to be completely honest, whenever I decided I was going to do power rankings, I didn't think this guy was ever going to drop out of the top 5. I didn't think I would ever have to take this guy out of the top 3. He was number 5 on the list last week. He is unranked going into week 3 of the NHL season. That's the captain, Sidney Crosby. Some of you might disagree with me. Some of you might think, well, he's still getting on the score sheet, and you're not entirely wrong. But at the same time, when I look at Crosby, I look at a player who only has 3 points at even strength this year. I look at a player who leads the Pittsburgh Penguins forwards in giveaways this year, who has been a very big liability in his own zone this year. A big portion of those defensive struggles falls on the shoulders, of Sidney Crosby. And I also look at Crosby as a player that, when on the ice at 5-on-5, has allowed 101 scoring chances against. If you look at how much time he's played at 5-on-5 this season, he's allowing one scoring chance every 90 seconds that he's on the ice. He hasn't been good enough. The Pittsburgh Penguins this year, if they wanted to go anywhere, they needed Crosby to be excellent, which he has been for 19 seasons. And I'm not saying that you can't expect excellence from him at some point this year. All I'm saying is through the first 10 games, he hasn't been. And in fact, he's been hurting the Penguins more than he's been helping. I would say one of these 10 games, he has been himself, where he has looked himself. And because of that, I can't justify keeping him in my top 5 rankings. Let me know if I'm way off base there or not. But to me, it just feels like he is not one of the 5 best Pittsburgh Penguins as we stand today. I got one honorable mention this week. I believe I had 2 last week, but I only got 1 this week. And he didn't play on Saturday. Is that the last game? Yeah, he didn't play on Saturday night, which means he is no longer eligible for the Iron Penguin Award, an award that we give out on Tip of the Iceberg to any player who plays in all 82 games. So Cody Glass is no longer part of that because he missed Saturday's game due to illness. But whenever he has been in the lineup, which is the other 9 games of the season, he's been very good for the Penguins. Whether that's in a 4th line role at center or whenever they put him up on the 3rd line as a winger, Cody Glass has just been good, flat out, all season long for the Pittsburgh Penguins. Still hasn't had his first goal, still needs to start finishing a little bit more. But as far as the bottom 6 is concerned, I wouldn't hate it if they kept Cody Glass around for the foreseeable future. I know he only had 1 year left on that contract when the Penguins acquired him from the Nashville Predators, but he has been very good for them. And they're going to have a lot of decisions to make because eventually Blake Lizotte will come back. Eventually Matt Nieto will come back. He was on the ice with the Penguins at practice today, so maybe his return is in the near future. But I think regardless of whoever comes back, you need to find a spot in the lineup for Cody Glass. I don't know if he's quite ready to play top 6 minutes, but again, as we'll get into, the top 6 hasn't been overly impressive. So if Cody Glass can get an opportunity up there, who knows? Maybe he shines. That's what the pedigree he was supposed to have coming into the National Hockey League. He wasn't able to find it in Vegas. He wasn't able to find it in Nashville. And I'm not saying that he's going to find it in Pittsburgh, but all I'm saying is he's been a very good piece for the Penguins' bottom six, and he deserves a little bit of mention. Hence the reason I'm going to make him my honorable mention for this week's Power Rankings. Let's get into the top five here and start with number 5, somebody that wasn't ranked, somebody who I supplanted Sidney Crosby with at number 5 this week. And again, if you would have told me this 3 weeks ago when I determined that I was going to do these power rankings, I would have said, you are crazy. And yet here we stand at number 5 this week, Noel Acciari. In 10 games played this year, he has 1 goal and 2 assists, but that doesn't really tell the story, nor does it ever tell the story of how good Noel Acciari has been for the Penguins this season. He is leading the Pens in defensive zone starts, in body checks with 30, and he's leading all forwards in block shots with 14. He is, if not the reason, one of the biggest reasons that the Penguins' bottom six has felt so much better this year than it has in years past. It's because Noel Acciari has taken his game to another level, and really, it's because him, Kevin Hayes, and Cody Glass have meshed really well together. So 2/3 of that line end up being in the discussion for power rankings. One player of that line ends up on the power rankings, and that's Noel Acciari at number 5. At number 4, no change from last week. I'm keeping Rickard Rakell in there. He didn't do anything to move up, but also I don't think anybody did enough to move past him in this past week, because if you look at the games the Penguins have played, not a lot of notable positive performances. Obviously, losers of 5 straight games. They weren't able to get anything other than a pity point in Calgary through the entire Western Canada road trip. But at the same time, I thought Rickard Rakell kept his level of play up, even if it didn't show on the score sheet. 10 games played this year for Rakell, 4 goals, 2 assists. He is analytically, according to Natural Stat Trick, far and away the Penguins' best top 6 forward this season. When it comes to shot attempts, when it comes to scoring chances, when it comes to expected goals, Rickard Rakell is the guy in the Penguins' top 6 to start this season. And you're starting to see Mike Sullivan defer to him to try to help get Sidney Crosby out of his funk. Because as we mentioned, Penguins go nowhere unless Sidney Crosby bounces back. They need to do something to get him there. And the fact that Mike Sullivan is putting Rickard Rakell on that line a little bit more often is leading to the fact that Rickard Rakell has been that good. He is the potential answer to help get Crosby back on track. When you look at what we've seen this year with Crosby and Rakell, since they started doing that, Sidney Crosby, when he's with Rickard Rakell at 5-on-5, 40 minutes of ice time, 58% of the shot attempts, they're outscoring opponents 3-2, and they are controlling 51% of the scoring chances. Crosby without Rakell this season, 113 minutes of ice time, 47% of the shot attempts, so a drop by 11% in shot attempts with Rakell versus without Rakell for Crosby. 3-9, the Penguins are being outscored when Crosby's on the ice without Rakell at 5-on-5, and 42% of the scoring chances. Now, I understand. You might say, defensively, it doesn't really equate to much, because you look at in 40 minutes, they've allowed 2 goals together, and in 113 minutes, Crosby has allowed 9. That kind of balances out as only a couple goals apart. But in a third of the time, they have the same amount of goals at 5-on-5. That's the big thing for Crosby. If you're not going to fix the defense, which is a wholesale issue with the team, it's not just Crosby's line, although Crosby's line has been the biggest kind of reason, or the biggest example of poor defense from the Penguins. You'd at the very least get more offense from that unit. And that's what the Penguins right now are. They're a team that won't play defense, but they're going to generate a lot of offense. But a lot of that offense is coming from the power play, and it's coming from the bottom 6. They need more out of Crosby's line, especially. Malkin has had those weeks where he was really good. He's had a week now where he's been pretty invisible. And then he had a game where he had 3 points on Saturday. So he's bouncing back a little bit. Crosby's line is the one line that has offensively been an undeniable negative from game 1 to game 10, with the exception of that one game against Buffalo. If Rickard Rakell can go up there and he can help kind of revitalize Crosby, that's going to be a huge thing for the Pittsburgh Penguins. So no change. Rickard Rakell stays at number 4 this week. Before we get into our top 3, I want to quickly remind everybody that it is Watchalong week at the tip of the Ice-Burgh. We're going to have 2 watch-alongs for the 2 home games that the Pittsburgh Penguins have this week. Starting tomorrow, Penguins versus Wild, and then on Thursday, Penguins versus Anaheim Ducks. come join me and a couple of guests as we sit back and we watch the Penguins try to bounce back after a horrid Western Canada road trip. Are they going to be able to do it against a red-hot Minnesota Wild team and Marc-Andre Fleury, or are they going to have to wait to do it on Thursday against the young Mighty Ducks on Halloween evening? So Tuesday and Thursday this week, watch-alongs at the Tip of the Ice-Burgh. Streams begin at 7 p.m. Eastern. Let's get back into the final three, the top three of the power rankings, and I will just say this. Minimal changes over the past week. Like I mentioned, there weren't any real notable performances through most of this week, and that's going to lead to this. Not a lot of changes in the power rankings. Number 3, down one spot from last week, is going to be Lars Eller. 10 games played, he has 4 goals and 2 assists, and he just continues to be the most consistent player the Pittsburgh Penguins have to offer, right? The Pens continue to throw everything but the kitchen sink at Lars Eller when it comes to responsibilities. A lot of D-zone starts, a lot of power, not a lot of power play time, but he does get some power play time, a lot of penalty kill time. He's been given new line mates day in and day out. He's been with O'Connor at times. He's been with Puljujärvi at times. He's been with Cody Glass. He's been with Anthony Beauvillier. He basically just sits there while the revolving door goes around him on the wings, and yet he continues to play at a high level. He did quiet down a little bit versus what we saw over the first 2 weeks, hence the reason he bounced down one spot. But I still think Lars Eller has been one of the most consistent and one of the best Penguins so far this season, so he will sit at number 3. Switching with him, so basically a flip-flop from last week, Joel Blomqvist. When it comes to who had the best single performance of in the last week for the Penguins, it goes to Blomer. 5 games played this season, 2 wins, 3 losses, a .911 save percentage, 3.34 goals against average, which that one I'm gonna put on the defense more than I'm gonna put on him, and 3.7 goals saved above expected, which is good for 12th in the National Hockey League. Like I mentioned, he only played in 1 game this past week, but that 1 game was the best performance we've seen from anybody in black and gold over the past 7 days. 46 saves on 50 shots against the Edmonton Oilers. When they were putting him in there, I said, man, you're really feeding the rookie to an Edmonton Oilers team that is upset with the way they're playing and that continues to just beat the crap out of the Penguins anytime they play them. Blomqvist went out there. He kept them in the game way longer than they deserve to be. He continues to impress every single game that he gets an opportunity to go in. And with the Tristan Jarry situation now being pretty set in stone, Kyle Dubas said over the weekend that he's going to stay down there for 2 weeks. Blomqvist is going to get more opportunities. Every time he's gone out there so far, he's impressed. I would expect nothing less over the next 2 weeks, and then we'll see what the decision is or what ends up happening. Maybe they run it back with 3 goaltender system again, or maybe they have to send him down. But I think Blomqvist has deserved and earned the right to be in the National Hockey League. And at number 1, for the 3rd consecutive week to start the season, because I don't think anybody was good enough to knock him out. Not that he had a phenomenal week to be at number 1, but he has been the Penguins' best player accumulatively. Let me get that word right. Throughout the entire season, and that's Evgeni Malkin. 10 games played, 3 goals, 11 assists. He did vanish for a handful of games on that road trip. Kind of reappeared on Saturday against Vancouver. 1 goal, 2 assists, another 3-point performance for Evgeni Malkin. They need him to get back to what he was early in the season. I don't expect him to be able to be that all year long. You just need the droughts to be as they have been this week. A handful of games, doesn't look like everything's going right, and then he bounces back with a 3-point performance. If they can get that out of Malkin, I think that's more than you can ask for. Especially, I mean, he's on pace to have over a point per game this season, which is way more than you should be asking of a 38-year-old in Evgeni Malkin, especially when Sidney Crosby isn't doing nearly that. So if Malkin can continue to play the way he has, and Crosby can bounce back due to whatever reason, if it's with Rickard Rakell because Rakell is there, if it's with Drew O'Connor because he steps up more, if it's with Brian Rust, if he ends up being healthy, he didn't practice today, whatever reason, the Penguins need Sidney Crosby to be better. The Penguins need Evgeni Malkin to be exactly what he's been. Can't ask for much more from Malkin. You know, it's unfortunate that he vanished and didn't stay on that torrid pace that he was at, but I don't think any of us expected that. So those are the power rankings for week 3 of the Pittsburgh Penguins season. Noel Acciari makes his season debut in the top 5 at number 5. Rickard Rakell stays put At number 4, Lars Eller and Joel Blomqvist swap spots once again. Blomqvist goes up to 2. Lars Eller bumps down to number 3. And at number 1, for the third consecutive week, still the only player to be ranked number 1 in these power rankings, Evgeni Malkin. Let me know in the comment section, what is your top 5 after 3 weeks of play? Do you think the Penguins are going to be able to take down the Minnesota Wild tomorrow and end their 5-game losing streak? And if you want, join me on the Tip of the Ice-Burgh watch along tomorrow as we watch them try to attempt it. But that's going to do it for this episode of the Tip of the Ice-Burgh. Thank you guys so much for tuning into this one. We'll see you guys next time.